Fine rain fell over the gardens of Vorten Mansion, transforming the perfectly tended rose bushes into blurs of color under the gray sky. The funeral hall, normally closed and silent, now perspired with the heat of compressed bodies and the dense smell of incense and white flowers. Tenil stood beside the two mahogany coffins, hands clasped in front of his body, his face a marble mask revealing nothing of the hell burning underneath. Impeccable black clothes, upright posture, dry eyes. He hadn't cried. Not a single tear in the 3 days since Gareth had brought the news. While his mother drowned in sobs, while servants wept openly, while the world around him crumbled in a cacophony of pain, Tenil remained cold, controlled, frozen, because if he allowed the first crack to open, the entire dam would collapse. And he couldn't allow that. Not now. Not when there was so much to do. The funeral guests formed a sea of black and gray. Hundreds of nobles, merchants, military officers, those who owed favors to House Vorten or wanted to be seen paying respects. Whispers filled the corners of the hall. Words about tragedy, about bad luck, about how dangerous the world was, even for the great hypocrites. All of them. Tenil swept the hall with steel eyes, cataloging each face, searching for one in particular, Lord Kasimir. And there he was, in the center of the hall, surrounded by his own servants and allies. Wearing the most expensive black, his expression perfectly calibrated between solemn respect and appropriate sadness. Silver hair combed back, beard trimmed with precision, ice blue eyes showing absolutely nothing. 45 years old, powerful, connected, untouchable, and a murderer. Tenil forced himself to look away before rage betrayed him. Before he crossed the hall and buried a dagger in that aristocratic neck, consequences be damned. Not yet. Not here. But not like this. The royal priest, an elderly man in white and gold vestments, raised his hands, asking for silence. His voice echoed through the hall with the trained resonance of decades of sermons. We gather today under the eyes of the gods to honor two men of exceptional character. Lord Kasimir Vorten, pillar of nobility, guardian of honor, commander in the border wars, and Dramatized Vorten, promising youth, heir to an ancient lineage, cut down in his spring by cruel and cowardly hands. Cruel and cowardly hands. Tenil clenched his fists until his nails dug into his palms. The priest continued with ritual blessings, words about souls ascending to divine halls, about legacies that transcend mortal flesh, about the consolation of eternal memory. Empty words, meaningless words, but necessary, because this was the performance society demanded. When the priest finished, he invited those present to offer their tributes. One by one, nobles approached the coffins, depositing white flowers, murmuring words of condolence to Lady Morel, who sat in a nearby chair. Her eyes red and swollen, her small body broken beneath mourning veils. Tenil watched each one, studied each expression, searched for signs of complicity, of hidden knowledge. How many here know the truth? How many are laughing inside while feigning grief? Finally, Lord Kasimir approached. His steps were measured, solemn, perfectly appropriate. He stopped before the coffins for a long moment, his head bowed in respect. Then he turned to Lady Morel. Lady Vorten, his voice was smooth as velvet over steel. There are no adequate words to express my sorrow. Caius was a remarkable man. Dravik, a brilliant young man. Their deaths are priceless losses not only to your family, but to the entire kingdom. Lady Morel merely nodded, unable to speak, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Kasimir then turned to Tenil, and their eyes met. For a fraction of a second, Tenil saw something there. A gleam. A microscopic satisfaction that disappeared so quickly it could have been imagination. But it wasn't. Young Vorten Kasimir extended his hand. You have my deepest sympathy and my complete support during this difficult time. There's anything I can do to help. The audacity. The pure and absolute audacity of standing there, offering help, when it was he who had destroyed everything. Tenil took Kasimir's hand, gripped it, looked directly into those ice-blue eyes. "Thank you, Lord Kasimir." His voice came out perfectly controlled. "Your support is ... invaluable." Something passed between them in that handshake. A silent acknowledgement. Kasimir knew that Tenil suspected, and Tenil knew that Kasimir knew. But there, surrounded by hundreds of witnesses, neither could do anything but perform their aristocratic masks. When Kasimir finally moved away, Tenil had to force himself to breathe. His hands trembled slightly, but he hid them behind his back, maintaining his impeccable posture. The rest of the funeral dragged on in a fog. More tributes, more empty words. More hypocritical faces, feigning grief. When they finally finished and the coffins were taken to the family mausoleum in the gardens, Tenil felt simultaneously exhausted and charged with energy. He wanted to run, wanted to scream, wanted to destroy something with his own hands. But instead, he stood there, the loyal son, the perfect noble, the image of controlled dignity. Because that was what was expected of him. And because, for now, that was his best weapon. The funeral guests eventually departed, leaving the mansion in heavy and suffocating silence. Lady Morel withdrew to her chambers with the maids, unable to bear another moment of forced socialization. Tenil was in the library, looking without seeing at the same maps his father had studied just days ago, when a servant announced a visitor. "Sir Royal Chancellor Aldrich Thorn is here. He requests urgent audience." Tenil felt a chill run down his spine. The Royal Chancellor, second most powerful man in the kingdom, answering only to the king. Why is he here? "Show him in." Chancellor Thorn was a tall, thin man in his 60s, with completely white hair and honey-colored eyes that seemed to see through any lie. He wore the official robes of his office royal blue with gold embroidery on, carried the king's seal hanging on a heavy chain around his neck. He entered the library with the silent authority of someone accustomed to absolute power. "Young Vorten." Thorn inclined his head slightly. "My condolences for your loss." "Thank you, Chancellor." Tenil gestured to a chair. "Please sit. May I offer wine?" Thorn sat, folding his hands in his lap. "I came here on behalf of the king to discuss House Vorten's situation." The situation, Tenil felt the implicit threat in those words. "What situation, Chancellor?" "The death of your father and brother was a tragedy, but it also created a power vacuum." Thorn spoke with the same neutrality he might discuss the weather. "Your father controlled vast properties, multiple trade routes, and had significant influence at court. All of this now falls to you, as it should. I am the heir. You are young, inexperienced." Thorn leaned forward, "And there are concerns about your ability to maintain your father's commitments to the crown." There it was. The real reason for the visit. "What kind of concerns?" "The king is aging. Succession approaches. Your father was a reliable ally, but also too independent for some tastes at court. There were those who wanted to see him more malleable." Thorn's eyes fixed on Tenil's, "And now he's dead. In circumstances convenient for certain interests." Tenil felt his heart race, but kept his voice steady. "Are you suggesting my father's murder was political?" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating a fact." Thorn leaned back in his chair. "And here's another fact. If you start making accusations without solid proof, you won't last a week. Kasimir has protections you can barely imagine, allies in places you'll never reach, and resources that will make yours seem insignificant." The name, Thorn, had said the name. "How do you, ... double quotes, I know many things, young Vorten. It's my job to know." Thorn raised a hand. "But knowledge isn't the same as proof, and proof isn't the same as justice. You may know who killed your family. You may even manage to prove it eventually. but that doesn't mean you'll be able to do anything about it. So what are you telling me? Anger leaked into Tenil's voice now, that I should accept it. That I should let my father's murderer walk free. I'm telling you that you need to be smart. Thorn stood up, walking to the window. Kasimir is powerful because he's patient. He moves pieces slowly, meticulously. He waits years to execute plans, and when he acts, it's always in a way that protects him from direct retaliation. And the king, will he do nothing? Thorn laughed, a humorless sound. The king is dying, boy. He barely knows his own name some days. The crown is in the hands of advisors and nobles playing their own games, and Kasimir is one of the most skilled players. You're just ... a piece. A piece he decided was better removed from the board. The weight of those words settled on Tenil like a tombstone. Powerlessness. Absolute and suffocating powerlessness. So there's nothing I can do. I didn't say that. Thorn turned from the window. I said you can't act rashly. Can't go to court shouting accusations. Can't challenge him openly. That would be suicide. But there are other paths. Darker paths. More patient. Revenge. Justice. Thorn corrected. The difference between the two is just a matter of perspective. He walked toward the door, but paused at the threshold. A word of advice, young Vorten. If you truly want to bring down a man like Kasimir, you'll need to become something he doesn't expect, something he can't predict or control. You'll need to stop being the spoiled noble he believes you to be, and become what? Thorn looked at him for a long moment. Something more dangerous. Something willing to descend into the shadows where men like Kasimir truly operate. He opened the door. But know this. If you choose that path, there's no going back. The person you were will die along with your father and brother, and what emerges on the other side may be something you don't recognize in the mirror. And then he was gone, leaving Tenil alone in the library with those words echoing. Tenil looked at his own hands, hands that had never known real work, hands that had never been soiled with anything more serious than correspondence ink. Useless hands. He thought of Kasimir standing before the coffins, offering condolences with that perfectly controlled face. Thought of his father, bleeding in some remote gorge, his last word being a warning. Thought of Dravik, who died trying to save his father, never having the chance to become the man he should have been. And he thought of himself, Tenil Vorten, second son, narcissist, useless. Powerless. The word burned like acid. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the wooden floor. His eyes fell on a decorative dagger on the wall, a gift from some minor noble years ago. He took it, testing the weight in his hand. Beautiful, ornate, completely useless for real combat. Just like him. Tenil looked at his reflection in the polished metal of the blade. Saw the perfect face, the perfectly arranged hair, the impeccably cut clothing. Saw a piece of decoration, not a warrior, not an avenger, just a spoiled noble playing it dangerous. And in that moment, something inside him broke. Not the anger that remained, burning constant, but the arrogance, the certainty of his own capability. He wasn't ready, not even close. If he tried to face Kasimir now, it would be like a child trying to fight a master swordsman. He would be crushed, destroyed, and his family would have died for nothing. Thorn was right. He needed to change, needed to transform into something different. Something capable of surviving in a world much dirtier and more violent than the ballrooms he knew. But how? How does someone who spent their entire life in protected privilege transform into a weapon? The answer came unexpectedly. An uninvited memory. Amber eyes full of rage. A woman spitting on the ground. 2 swords tracing deadly arcs. Raya Pharaohs. She knew violence, knew fighting, knew the world beyond mansion walls. She was exactly the type of person who could survive in the dark places Thorn had mentioned. And she hated him. Completely. But perhaps there was a way to use that. Tenil put the dagger back on the wall, his mind working. He couldn't face Kasimir alone. He needed allies. Needed people willing to operate outside the rules of nobility. Needed something Kasimir would never expect. And for the first time since Gareth had brought the news, Tenil felt something beyond rage and despair. He felt determination. He didn't know how yet, didn't know when, but he would find a way, would descend into the shadows if necessary, would soil his perfectly manicured hands with blood if that's what it took. Kasimir thought he had removed a piece from the board, but he had only created an enemy. Tenil couldn't sleep. Lying in his enormous bed, staring at the ornate ceiling bathed in moonlight filtered through the curtains. He felt the weight of the mansion's silence pressing against him. Every corridor was too quiet. Every shadow seemed too dark. And everywhere, the absences screamed louder than any sound. His father wasn't in the office reviewing documents late. Dravik wasn't in his chambers, probably reading some adventure novel he'd never admit to liking. The life Tenil knew was dead as the bodies in the mausoleum. He got up, unable to bear the stillness any longer. He put on a robe and walked barefoot to the window, opening it to let the night air in. The garden below was bathed in lunar silver. Everything perfectly symmetrical, everything perfectly dead. That's when he heard it, a soft sound coming from the corridor. Light footsteps. Tenil opened the door silently and saw a small mourning figure walking toward the stairs. His mother, Lady Morel in a nightgown, descending like a ghost. He followed her, keeping his distance, watching as she crossed the dark mansion toward the library. When she entered, Tenil waited a few seconds before following. Lady Morel stood before the portrait of Lord Vorten hanging over the fireplace painted 10 years ago, when he still had strength and vigor in his eyes. She looked at it with an expression that broke something in Tenil's chest. It wasn't just sadness, it was total devastation. "Mother," he spoke softly. She turned, and when she saw Tenil, her features contorted. For a moment, it seemed she would collapse again. But then something stiffened in her. Some ancient willpower she summoned from the depths. "Can't sleep either." Her voice was hoarse from crying. "No." Tenil approached, standing beside her before the portrait. "I can't close my eyes without seeing, ... double quotes, I know." She took his hand, squeezing with surprising strength. "Tenil, I need you to promise me something, anything. Don't let this destroy you." She looked directly at him, her eyes red but determined. "I know what you're thinking. I know what's burning inside you. You're my son. I know you better than you know yourself." "Mother, no. Let me finish." She squeezed harder. "Your father and brother are dead. And whoever did this, ... double quotes." She paused, breathing deeply, ... will pay. One day, somehow, but I can't lose you too. I can't bury my last son." Tenil felt something burn behind his eyes. The first crack in the dam. "I won't. You will, if you're reckless. If you let anger blind you, if you act without thinking." Lady Morel released his hand and walked to the desk, picking up a letter with the family seal. "I received this today. It's from my sister in Eloria. She offers refuge. Says we can live there, safe, away from this kingdom's rotten politics. You want to run?" Tenil couldn't hide the disappointment in his voice. "I want to survive," she corrected, her voice sharp. "And I want you to survive. Tenil, you don't understand the danger we're in. If it really was Kasimir, he won't stop just because he killed your father and brother. He'll want to ensure there's no Vorten to take revenge, that there are no witnesses, that there are no threats." Tenil completed. "He'll come after us." Yes, Lady Morel let the letter fall onto the desk. "That's why we must go. We must disappear before it's too late." Tenil looked at his father's portrait, at those painted eyes that seemed to judge him across time. "What would you do, father?" Would you run? He already knew the answer. Lord Vorten had never run from anything in his life. Even dying, he had fought. Even with arrows raining and swords seeking his blood, he had remained standing. And Dravik had placed himself between the blades and his father, had died protecting the man he loved. Courage, honor, loyalty to family. These were the things the Vortens stood for. And now his mother wanted them to flee like frightened rats. No. Tenil heard himself say, "What? I won't run, mother." He turned to face her. "And neither should you. Tenil, please, father wouldn't run. Dravik wouldn't run. And I won't dishonor them by being a coward now." His voice gained strength, certainty. "If Kasimir wants to destroy us, he'll have to work for it. And as long as I breathe, as long as the Vorten name means something, I will fight." Tears streamed down Lady Morelle's face again. "You'll die. Like your father, like your brother," maybe Tenil admitted. "But I won't die running, won't die powerless." He took his mother's hands, holding them firmly. "You can go to Aloria if you want. I would understand, but I'm staying, and I'll find a way to make Kasimir pay." Lady Morelle looked at her son for a long moment, and then, slowly, she shook her head. "You're as stubborn as your father." A weak, sad smile touched her lips. "All right, I'll stay too. But Tenil, promise me one thing." "What?" "Be smart. Don't be noble. Be smart." She touched his face softly. "Your father was always too honorable, too direct, and it killed him. If you're going to do this, if you're really going to seek revenge, do it their way, dirty, hidden. Patient." It was almost exactly what Thorn had said. "I promise." Tenil kissed his mother's forehead. "I'll learn. I'll transform into whatever's necessary. But I'll do it right."
They stood there for a few more minutes, two survivors holding each other in a mansion too large and too empty. Eventually, Lady Morelle went up to her chambers, too exhausted for more words. Tenil remained in the library, looking at his father's portrait. And for the first time since the death, he felt something different from anger. He felt clarity. He knew what he needed to do. Not the details yet, but the direction. He needed to leave the mansion walls. Needed to find people willing to help him, not out of loyalty to House Vorten, but for their own reasons. Needed to build something in the shadows, away from Kasimir's eyes. And he knew exactly where to start. Tomorrow he would go to the docks, would find that woman with fire in her eyes and rage in every movement, and somehow he would convince Raya Ferros to help him, even though she hated him, perhaps especially because she hated him. Because that hatred meant she wasn't bound by the rules of nobility. Meant she could do things he couldn't. Meant she was exactly the type of person he needed. Tenil walked to the window, looking at the city beyond the walls. Thousands of small lights, thousands of lives he had always despised. But now he would need to dive into that world. Would need to get dirty. Would need to stop being the Tenil who looked at those lives with disdain and become something that could survive among them. The metamorphosis would begin tomorrow, and when it was complete, when he was finally ready, Kasimir would discover he had made a fatal mistake. He hadn't removed a threat, he had created one.
Tenil shouldn't have been there. Not at that hour, not alone, not rummaging through his father's personal documents like a common thief. But the mansion slept. His mother had finally succumbed to sleep after days of grief-induced insomnia. and something inside him insisted there were answers hidden in that office. Answers no one else would look for. The light from a single candle cast dancing shadows on the book-lined walls. Tenil sat behind his father's massive mahogany desk, that same desk where just weeks ago they had discussed Lord Kasimir and his poisoned offers. How different everything seemed now. How distant everything felt. He opened drawer after drawer, finding the usual commercial contracts. Correspondence with other nobles, property records, sealed legal documents. Everything perfectly organized, everything meticulously filed. His father had been a man of order. But something was wrong. An inconsistency that Tenil only now noticed. The big decisions his father made about alliances, about investments, about political positioning always seemed to come from nowhere, like sudden insights. Lord Vorten would simply announce a change of course, and everyone accepted it because he was always right. But no one was always right by luck or instinct. There was always a source, always an advisor. Tenil pulled the bottom right drawer, the deepest one. Locked, he frowned, searching for the key on his father's keyring. 3 attempts, and finally the soft click of the lock surrendering. Inside, a bundle of letters tied with black ribbon. Tenil picked them up with slightly trembling hands, not from fear, but from anticipation. He untied the ribbon and spread the letters across the desk. Dozens of them, all with the same wax seal. A raven in flight, wings spread, pressed in black wax. No noble crest, no official identification. He picked up the most recent one dated 8 days ago, just 2 days before his father's fatal departure. The paper was good quality, but not luxurious. The calligraphy, elegant but efficient, without unnecessary flourishes. Caius, the letter began, dispensing with formalities. News from court confirms my earlier suspicions. King Aldrich doesn't have months. He has weeks, perhaps days. The symptoms you mentioned, bloody cough, persistent fever, disorientation, correspond to the final stages of the silent plague. The royal physicians are hiding this, but my contacts in the private quarters confirm. Tenil paused, his heart racing. The silent plague. A rare disease that consumed the lungs slowly, disguised as simple aging until it was too late. If the king was really dying, he continued reading. Kasimir knows this. He's moving pieces, quickly consolidating allies, offering generous partnerships to houses that are still undecided. His offer to you was no coincidence. He wants to ensure you're in debt when succession happens. My recommendation remains: refuse. Maintain independence. When the power vacuum comes, those tied to Kasimir will be consumed along with him if his bets fail. And they will fail. The Crown Prince hates him, for reasons we'll discuss in person. The letter continued with details about political movements, names of minor nobles being manipulated, warnings about certain trade routes. And it ended. See you next month, as always. Bring that Elorian wine you know I appreciate, you old bastard. Your brother-in-arms, Cornelius. Tenil reread the name 3 times. Cornelius. There was no surname, no indication of noble title. But the intimacy in the tone, the casual way he addressed Lord Caius Vorten. This wasn't a subordinate writing to his superior. It was an equal, or something close to it. Quickly, Tenil began reading other letters, jumping through months and years. Each one revealed layers of information that shouldn't be available. Conspiracies at court, military movements, planned betrayals, weaknesses of specific nobles. And in each letter, recommendations, strategic advice that Tenil recognized his father had followed almost all of them. A letter from 3 years ago warned against investing in copper mines in the north. 2 months later, the mines collapsed, bankrupting 3 noble houses. His father, who had been offered participation and refused, emerged unscathed. Another from 5 years ago suggested cultivating a relationship with the King of Eloria. Today, House Vorten had the best trade routes with the neighboring kingdom. Cornelius wasn't just an advisor. He was a political seer, someone with access to information no noble should have. And his father trusted him completely. Tenel returned to the most recent letter, the one about Kasimir. He reread the part about the king's illness, about the movements, about ... Wait ... We single quotes LL discuss in person. His father had planned to meet Cornelius, but didn't get the chance, was killed before. And now this man, this ghost advisor who knew all the secrets. He would know who killed Lord Vorten, might have even tried to warn him. Tenel gathered all the letters and searched for any indication of where to find Cornelius. Nothing, no address, no clue. Just that black raven seal. Frustration burned in his chest. So close to answers, and yet ... Then he saw it. On the back of one of the oldest letters, written by hand in faded ink. Almost invisible. If you need me urgently, look for the Raven's Nest. Silk Street, Port District. Ask for Vane. Vane, Cornelius Vane. Tenel memorized the address, returned the letters to the drawer, except the most recent one, which he folded and tucked into the inner pocket of his jacket and extinguished the candle. Tomorrow night, he would go down to the Port District, would find this ghost who had guided his father in the shadows for years, and convince Cornelius Vane to do the same for him. Tenel had never been to Silk Street. Technically, no respectable noble should be there. It was the kind of place that existed in embarrassed whispers where men with too much money and too little morals went when they wanted entertainment that polite society pretended did not exist. The street was narrow and poorly lit, lined with establishments with windows covered by red or purple curtains. Empty music from multiple locations, forced female laughter, the dense smell of cheap perfumes trying to mask sweat and alcohol. Tenel walked with careful steps, keeping his cloak pulled over his face. He had deliberately dressed without ostentation, simple dark clothes, no jewelry without the family's signet ring. But even so, he knew he didn't belong there. His posture was too wrong, his movements too controlled, his skin too clean. He screamed disguised noble. Men leaning against walls watched him with hungry, calculating eyes. Prostitutes called to him with whispered promises. He ignored them all, searching for the sign. And then he saw it, a weathered wooden board swinging slightly in the night breeze, the paint almost completely faded, but still recognizably Black Raven in a nest. The Raven's Nest. The establishment was larger than its neighbors, 3 stories of soot-darkened brick. Windows on the second and third floor glowed with golden light and shadows moving inside. The main door was guarded by 2 large men, not stupid brutes, but professional guards with attentive eyes. Tenel approached with confidence he didn't feel. "I'm looking for Vane." His voice came out firmer than expected. The 2 guards exchanged glances. The one on the left, a bald man with a scar crossing his scalp, tilted his head. "Vane doesn't receive just anyone, boy. He'll receive me." Tenel pushed back the hood slightly, allowing enough light to touch his face. "Tell him that Caius Vorten's son needs to speak with him. Urgent." Silence. The guards didn't move for a long moment, studying him. Then the bald one made an almost imperceptible gesture with his head, and the other guard disappeared inside. 3 minutes of uncomfortable waiting. Tenel could feel gazes from all over the street now, people noticing that something interesting was happening. The guard returned, nodded. 3rd floor, last door on the left, and boy. He grabbed Tenel's arm as he passed. "Vane doesn't like to be disappointed. If you're wasting his time, you'll leave here very different from how you entered." Tenel pulled his arm free and entered. The interior was unexpectedly elegant. The ground floor was a spacious hall with a central stage where 3 women danced in minimal clothing for an audience of men in various states of drunkenness. But the decoration was rich red velvet on the walls. Crystal chandeliers, surprisingly clean, polished, dark wood furniture. It wasn't a cheap brothel. It was a gentleman's club disguised as a brothel. Tenil climbed the stairs, passing the second floor where closed doors let escape various sounds conversations. Laughter, moans. The third floor was quieter, more private. Carpeted corridors that muffled footsteps. Last door on the left, he knocked 3 times. "Come in, young Vorten." The voice from inside was deep, hoarse from decades of tobacco and alcohol. Tenil opened the door and entered an office that surprised him again. Bookshelves covered 2 entire walls. Volumes on military history, philosophy, politics. An elegant desk dominated the center, covered with maps and papers. And near the window overlooking the street, sitting in a leather armchair, was Cornelius Vane. The man was imposing, even sitting down. Robust body, broad shoulders, a presence that filled the space. Dark skin, face marked by scars that told stories of survived violence. Round, gold-framed glasses reflected the candlelight, partially hiding his eyes, but not the intensity with which he studied Tenil. He wore a 3-piece suit in earth tones brown, beige perfectly fitted vest with gold watch chain, orange tie, brown leather gloves, even indoors, top hat resting on the desk beside him, and in his right hand, a pipe releasing aromatic smoke spices and burnt wood. Cornelius took a long draw, released the smoke slowly, and finally spoke. "So you're Caius's spoiled son." It wasn't a question. It was an assessment. "I expected you to come sooner. 5 days since the funeral. I thought perhaps you'd be smarter than that." Tenil felt anger burn, but forced himself to remain calm. "I didn't know of your existence until last night, because you didn't look until last night." Cornelius. Atis pointed the pipe at a chair facing him. "Sit. You're giving me a neck-ache standing there like a nervous statue." Tenil sat, keeping his back straight, refusing to appear intimidated, even though he was. Cornelius studied him in silence for a long moment, those eyes behind the glasses dissecting every detail. "You look like him," he finally said. "The same arrogance in the chin. It's the same noble stupidity in the shoulders." He laughed, a sound without real humor. "But the eyes are different." Caius had soldiers' eyes had already seen enough shit to know the world is a latrine. You still have the eyes of a child who believes in things?" "I'm not a child," Tenil shot back. "No." Cornelius leaned forward. "Then tell me, Tenil Vorten, what are you?" The question caught him off guard. "I am ... I am the heir of House Vorten." "Wrong. You were the second son. Now you're an orphan of father and brother, heir to a ruined house, target of a man infinitely more powerful than you." Cornelius tapped ash from his pipe into an ashtray. "You are nothing. Yet, that's why I'm here." Tenil kept his voice firm. "You helped my father. I need you to help me." "Why?" "'Cause Kasimir killed my family, and I'm going to destroy him." Heavy silence filled the office. Cornelius didn't react initially, just continued smoking, those eyes fixed on Tenil. Then he laughed. Really laughed, a deep laugh that shook his broad shoulders. "Destroy Kasimir," he repeated between laughs. "Boy, do you have any idea what you're saying? Lord Kasimir controls half the court, has 3 minor noble houses as vassals, possesses private armies larger than many cities have guards, and has the ear of royal advisors. And you, ... double quotes, he gestured at Tenil with a pipe. "You're a 23-year-old noble who's never dirtied his hands with anything dirtier than correspondence. Ink." "I know that," Tenil admitted, hating how true it sounded. "That's why I need you. To teach me, to transform me into something capable of what?" A Cornelius cut in. "Of killing one of the most protected men in the kingdom. Of executing revenge against someone who has more resources in one drawer than you have in entire properties. Yes, you're going to die. Probably." Tenil leaned forward now too. "But I'll die trying. Because the alternative is living knowing my father's murderer walks free, breathes free, laughs free, while I simply ... accept it. And that's worse than death." Cornelius stopped laughing. His expression became serious, those eyes studying Tenil with new intensity. Why should I risk everything I've built for a suicidal boy with delusions of revenge? Because you loved my father. Tenil threw the letter on the desk. He wasn't just a client. He was your brother in arms. You fought beside him, bled together. And now he's dead, and whoever killed him is still alive, and that, double quotes, his voice faltered for the first time. That has to mean something. Silence again, but different now. Cornelius rose slowly, moving to the window. He stood there for a long moment, his back to Tenil, looking at the street below. Your father saved my life once, he said softly. In the border wars, I was just a mercenary. He was the noble commander. He shouldn't have cared about me. But when I took an arrow to the neck and fell, he came back. Alone, crossed enemy lines, carried me half a kilometer with the arrow still stuck in my neck, and kept me alive until we reached the medics. He turned, and for the first time, Tenil saw real emotion in those eyes. When I asked why he risked everything for a nameless mercenary, you know what he said? Tenil shook his head. He said, because you looked at me as a man, not as a title, K, and that's worth more than any crest. Cornelius returned to the armchair. After the war, I could have gone back to mercenary life. But Caius offered me another option. Use my expertise in infiltration and information to help him navigate the rotten waters of noble politics. And for 20 years, that's exactly what I did. He relit his pipe, eyes never leaving Tenil. So yes, boy, I loved him like the brother I never had. And when I received news of his death, double quotes, his jaw tightened, I wanted blood as much as you want it now. Then help me. Tenil pleaded without shame. Help me get that blood. Cornelius smoked in silence for another moment. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. You have his eyes now. In this moment, what you said, the way you looked at me. He gave a dry laugh. Caius made exactly the same expression when he swore he would destroy the enemy commander who killed half our company. And he did. Took 3 years, but he did. He stood up, walked to Tenil, and extended an enormous hand. All right, young Vorten, I'll help you with your suicidal goal. The smile became more dangerous. But understand one thing, I'm not just going to help you. I'm going to transform you into something neither I nor your father managed to be. I'll teach you to operate where nobles don't dare tread. I'll show you how to build power in the shadows, how to move pieces no one sees, how to destroy enemies without ever being seen. Tenil stood, gripping the hand. It was like gripping steel wrapped in leather. I'm going to turn you into a ghost, boy. Cornelius squeezed harder. A ghost that Kasimir will only notice when he's already bleeding. But for that, double quotes, he pulled Tenil closer, voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You need to kill who you are, the spoiled noble, the privileged son, the ballroom boy. All of that needs to die. And what's born on the other side? Maybe something you don't recognize in the mirror. I accept. Tenil didn't hesitate. Cornelius studied him for another moment, then released his hand and returned to his armchair. Good. Your training begins tomorrow night. And boy, he pointed the pipe again. Don't tell your mother. Don't tell anyone. From now on, you have 2 worlds. What she sees and what we'll build in the shadows. Keeping these worlds separate is the first survival lesson. Understood. Now go. Cornelius made a dismissive gesture, and Tenil. Wear clothes you don't mind getting dirty tomorrow. We're going to start by showing you how the real world works. And it's much bloodier than your perfumed halls. Tenil nodded, turned to leave, but paused at the door. Cornelius. He looked back. Thank you. The old warrior smiled, but there was sadness too. Don't thank me yet, boy. Might end up hating me for what I'm going to do to you. He took a final draw. But at least you'll be alive to hate me. and that's already more than Kasimir would expect. Tenil left the raven's nest with a different weight on his shoulders. No longer the weight of powerlessness, but the weight of imminent transformation. And so, another chapter of our saga concludes, but the tapestry of time still holds many plots to be unveiled. To not miss the unfolding of upcoming events and continue the journey with us, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. Leave your like so more listeners discover our tales and share this story with those who also yearn for new legends. What was your favorite moment from this narrative? Leave your comment below and prepare for the next chapter that will soon echo here.